Hello and welcome to my channel. Earlier this month, Jordan Peele he did not direct, he produced a film called Him. The film starred Marlon Wayans and a young man named Tyriq Withers. And apparently it's about like the cultish behind the scenes world of professional football. That's all I know about it. I also know that people didn't really like it, which is unfortunate because I thought it had potential. I have not seen it. Like a lot of Jordan Peele movies, it dives into the psyche of what it means to be a Black American. And this time it was a Black American in sports. And so I just felt like I felt like it had potential. I'll probably watch it eventually. But something that came out of this movie was a reinvigoration of a conversation around a social phenomenon known as passing, which is when a person of presumed, it could be cultural status, it could be biological status, but in this case, it's racial status, reveals that they are actually part of another group and they have decided to take on another identity in order to keep themselves from being profiled, stereotyped, or just all around in general being held back by the restrictions that might be placed on their original indigenous group. In other words, passing, particularly in the Black community, has long since meant you have a person that looks white, and so they're able to exist in white society without being treated the way a Black person might be treated. This is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's been going on ever since like slavery, post-slavery days. People have been using their phenotypic privilege to their advantage and putting themselves in rooms that they would not have been able to get into if people knew their real identity. When it comes to Black America and the way that we have been treated in this country specifically, your race is your place in society. And in this country, we had things like the 1-drop rule, where if you had even 1 drop of Black blood, you were considered a Black person, and therefore society was going to try and treat you a specific way. So for a long time, people who can pass or people who choose to pass, so people who are white presenting and choose to pass, because those are two different things, and we're going to get into it. For a long time, they were looked at as sort of superheroes who were wearing kind of like an invisibility cloak, and they had this responsibility, I think, to the community. Are they going to use their phenotypic privilege to lift up the community, maybe gain secrets and access that are going to help people who don't have that privilege out? Or are they just going to assimilate seamlessly and completely leave their Black lineage behind? It's definitely a very interesting subject, and every time it comes up, there's a lot of infighting and conversation about it. And I'm going to be honest, I do not like the ways that we discuss passing. And the conversation around Tyriq Withers was no different. I say that the conversation was reinvigorated because this summer, when Sinners was released, or this spring, right? It was April when Sinners was released, Ryan Coogler's movie about the Black South and religion and music and vampires. When it came out, there was a character in it named Mary, and Mary was revealed to be a white presenting character who could pass if she wanted to. And the conversation blew up all over social media, people discussing what passing was, who could pass, what actors they thought should have been cast in Mary's place, et cetera, et cetera. And, once again, I was just like, we just discussed this all kind of wrong. But anyway, so when Him came out, the conversation came up again because Tyriq Withers, despite not looking like a Tyriq, right? He is a man who identifies as Black. He has a Black father, and he himself has acknowledged that he is white presenting and that he is, I think he called himself white passing. Well, here's what he had to say about his identity.
For you said, I'm Black, I'm mixed, I'm white passing. It seemed like you identified yourself as a Black man, but you had to also understand that you're mixed. And then you had to also understand that you're white passing, right?
Yeah.
How do you contend and come to your identity? Tell people that don't know you, they're going to look at you, they're going to hear you say all of those things, how you approach and contend with who you are and what your identity in America is.
Yeah. So my dad's a Black American, from Chicago. My mom's white from, Maine, and I'm the only one from Jacksonville, Florida. But yeah, I grew up not, in the Black experience, so I identify as a Black man, but I never want to take up space and say my experience is just as difficult because, I think the way I look, I grow my hair out, my hair's straight. My brother had the curly hair. And so, I walk through the world with privilege. So I'd be remiss to not mention that privilege. But yeah, growing up, I choose, my Blackness every day and I explore that. And even throughout college, I joined the first Black Greek letter organization, Alpha Phi Alpha, yeah. And then, even on campus of Florida State, getting involved with the Black Student Union, my first play was the first ever Black Student Union play at Florida State, that talked about themes of police brutality, being Black in America, and I think that was important for me to do. And so it's a everlasting journey, and I think being Black is an honor because we come from greatness, and I'm so lucky to have that. And I just want to live in that space to continue to tell stories that my people have witnessed throughout history.
Beautifully said.
That's the clip that I saw. And I watched it and I was like, oh, he seems very well spoken. It is a relief to hear somebody be honest. I feel like in a lot of ways, the ability to pass is kind of like being a Nepo baby, meaning it is a privilege that you have. And for you to acknowledge it takes a big, takes it, it's a very humbling thing. And it's also a very, has a lot of gravity because a lot of people would pull the victim card. And I'm not saying that people who are white presenting that happen to be Black or another race don't have strife in their lives. Absolutely. There's a whole movie about that called Imitation of Life. Okay. They have strife, but it's still a gargantuan privilege to be able to present in another way. And especially in the motion picture industry. And so for Tyriq to call that out, for him to be so open about claiming his Black identity, because you do have people, I wouldn't say Tiger Woods could pass, but I will say that Tiger Woods is a mixed race individual who is adamant about being mixed race. He will not say, I am a Black man. In fact, Tiger Woods said when he first came out years ago, he was like, I'm Coblin Asian. Because he apparently only had like 1/8 of Black blood in him or something like that. But, you look at Tiger Woods and it's like, you sure? Are you sure? Okay. But so you have some mixed race people who are like, no, I am not a Black person. I do not align that way. I am all of these different things, which they perfectly have a right to do. So it is interesting to me and a little bit of a relief when someone says, hey, I know that I am white presenting. I am a Black man. My father was Black. I am aligned with Black culture. And it's a relief because of the way that Black people tend to try and embrace everybody because of the one drop rule, etc. Like we just tend to say, you're one of us unless announced otherwise. So it's nice when that is returned versus being treated like we're some sort of leprous group of people that nobody would ever want to claim. So anyway, I liked what he had to say. I felt like, okay, this is an intelligent young man. Good for him. And once again, the comment section, I was like, we always choose to be the worst. This is not, I don't see why the conversation always goes the way that it does. And so I wanted to take a moment and I wanted to talk about what I don't like when it comes to how we discuss passing. The first thing I do not like when it comes to how we discuss passing is I don't like how we act shocked off our feet every time we see a person who is white presenting, but it turns out that they have Black ancestry. Going back to the conversations about Mary this summer, everyone acted like that would have been so impossible. That woman, there's no way anybody Black could have ever produced that woman. And what was so crazy is when Haley Steinfeld came out and said, actually, I am a white presenting Black person. And to me, Haley Steinfeld isn't white presenting. She's more, she looks Asian. She looks white and Asian. She looks mixed Asian presenting. And she's actually both Asian ancestry and Black ancestry. It turns out her Black I think it's her Black grandfather. He was Black and Asian. And so then after that, her parents, procreated with white people. And so you have her. But that was really crazy to me that this young woman, everybody was saying, oh, it couldn't have been. No, I don't, give us Zendaya. Give us Journey Smollett. And it's like, no, that's it. That's what it was. To me, people seem to be so, it seems hard to convince people of what a white presenting individual could look like, because I don't think people think it's possible, or they don't realize how common it is. So I thought I would provide a little visual for you here. Okay. This is how easy it is to get to a white presenting individual if you are a Black person. Okay. So you start off with one Black person who is presumably fully Black, which if you're Black American, that's not likely. But anyway, Black person who's presumably fully Black, they procreate with a white person. Now you have a biracial individual. This individual is presumably 50-50. Again, if it's a Black American parent, it's very unlikely that they're exactly 50-50. And that is because of chattel slavery and the fact that most Black people in this country, if we have ancestors that are here that are descendants of slaves, we have white blood in our bloodline, usually the product of some very untoward and deceitful acts by the people that enslaved us. So anyways, but you have a Black parent and they were supposedly completely Black. And then you had a white parent, they reproduced. Now you have this child that's 50-50. Now, if that child reproduces with a white person, now you have somebody who is 75% white. And that's when you get a child who looks a little bit like Drake's son. Okay. We used to see him a lot during Better Days for Drake. We don't see him a lot anymore. But whenever he, was shown to the world, everybody was like, well, what's this? What's going on? And he actually looks a lot like his grandmother. And because Drake is half Black, and then the baby's mom is white. I'm going to take it back a little bit further. So again, you have the Black parent with a white person. Then you get a biracial person, and they reproduce with a white person. And now you have somebody who is potentially completely white presenting. Now, going back to what I said about the Black parent, the initial Black parent, before we got to the biracial parent, the initial Black parent being 100% Black. If you have a Black parent who is just maybe 75% Black, you might have, by the time you get to that second generation, you might have somebody who looks a little bit more white presenting. So, for example, Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt was supposedly a Black actress. That's how she was treated when she was coming up in the industry. When she was trying to date Black men as a young Black actress, she talks about being rejected by Sidney Poitier and being rejected by, I think she says, Harry Belafonte kicked her out of his bed. I mean, it was rough. It was rough for Black women back then who were trying to date up and coming Black male actors, because they would tell them, you can't do anything for me. I need somebody who's going to help, really, really push me forward in society. So I don't really want a Black woman. I mean, we could sleep together, but that's about it. So Eartha Kitt, though, was considered a Black actress. That's how she was treated. That's how, I don't know. I won't say that's how she was cast, because she was given a lot of really cute little parts. But I can look at her and tell she's probably not 100% Black. To me, it gives more Native American, like mixed in that way. And it turns out, when you look her up, Eartha Kitt was actually half Native American, half Black. That's what her mother was. Her father, whom she didn't really know all that well, was apparently 100% white. And Eartha Kitt was the result of a sexual assault. Despite trying to couple up with a Black actor or two in her time, she was unable to do so. And Eartha Kitt ended up having a child with her white husband. She eventually married a white man. And that is where we get Kit Shapiro. And Kit Shapiro looks 100% white presenting to me. To me, if Kit Shapiro so chose, she could pass. So there you go. Within like 3 generations, you have a completely white presenting individual. It's very, very possible. Because it is so possible, it probably happens way more than we know. And the only time people have to actually bring it up and come out with it is when they're cast for that ability. So I don't know if Ryan Coogler already knew that about Haley Steinfeld, and so that's why he chose to put her in the movie in that role. When they're asked, this happens a lot of time on social media. So the other day I was scrolling, and or when I'm scrolling in general, sometimes I'll come across questions or comments or videos that people make about black hair. And there's a lot of curly hair routines, which I just scroll. I ain't got no curls. I have coils, and I'm proud of my coils. Thank you. So I just scroll, and that's not my hair type, but good for y'all. And sometimes it's about braids and getting braids and cornrows. And I remember this woman popped up one day talking about getting braids. And I was like, does she have a black child somewhere who needs braids? I was very confused. And so I looked at more of her content, and then she went out and got the braids. And I was like, this is a black woman. And eventually she did have to make a video addressing the fact that, yes, she was biracial. She was 50%, supposedly 50% black, 50% white. And her father was apparently in Earth, Wind, and Fire. Now, this woman actually, I did some more research. She was on a show called King's Court, and her name is Janae Robinson, and she's currently dating a retired former NBA player named Carlos Bozeman or Boozer or something like that. So she's a bit of a celebrity in kind, but we never would have gotten that explanation if somebody hadn't said, hey, your texture is similar to, but I'm having a hard time placing you. So I think, she could have just wandered through. If she never brought up getting braids, I never would have been like, And if she didn't do like the curly hair routines, nobody else would have batted an eye either. Like, she looks like I don't gather, she doesn't read as black to me at all. So I think there's a lot of people out there that live that reality, and they don't have to talk about it until it's brought up or until you ask. And I think for some people it might be easier not to bring it up, because then they'll be expected to, like Tyriq, make a full speech about their decisions and get possibly ripped apart for every little thing that they say. I also want to say there was another guy who came up on my timeline in that vein. This young man right here, he makes videos all the time where he's like, can I just remind you guys that I am a black man? And he says he has to do that because he'll be trying to speak to what's going on with the political times of our day, and people are like, hey, you're getting a little too comfortable, or why are you so passionate about what's happening with black people? They have questions for him, and he's like, wait, I'm black, So I think, yeah, unless it comes up, most people who are in this situation probably don't talk about their cultural, their genetic identity, but it happens, and it happens a lot. So I don't like that when you have a movie like Sinners and you have a character like Mary, everybody flips out and, what's it? No, she not black and she don't care. Technically, no, she's a lot of different things. But in a society where we literally had a one-drop rule, Mary would most likely have black relatives that she knew, black relatives that she talked to, maybe even a black parent, in the vein of Eartha Kitt, who's actually a mixed race person, but just looks, typically black. And as a result, she might culturally align with blackness. And so, yeah, it happens a lot, and it's not a new story. And I don't like that we always act like it's impossible for a black person to reproduce somebody that is white presenting. It is not impossible. It happens a lot. So let's talk for a second why I did have an issue kind of with what he said, not in the way that he explained it. I thought it was great, but to me, he is not white presenting. And this brings me to the next thing I don't like when we talk about passing. I don't like that we can't seem to get on board with what white presenting actually looks like. So I'm reading this book now. It is called The Feast of All Saints. And I'm reading it because I was scrolling on TikTok late one night and I came across the concept of la plaçage.
In the 1800s, New Orleans was home to a system called plaçage, where free women of color entered formal partnerships with French and Spanish men. They say Louisiana's Creole women only lived in the shadows of history, but the truth is many shaped society through these arrangements. A placée could not legally marry, but she often received a home, land, or financial security in exchange for her partnership. These women built property wealth, educated their children, and created a Creole elite that rivaled the influence of white families. Many sons from these unions went on to study in Paris, returning as doctors, lawyers, and artists. Daughters inherited property and carried family names that still mark New Orleans history today. Outsiders dismissed plaçage as scandal, but it was survival and strategy in a world built to deny women of color status. Louisiana's story cannot be told without them, even though most textbooks leave their names erased.
And after learning about this, I was like, wow, there's so much I don't know. Look, maybe I need to go and get a master's degree in African American studies because I had no idea. I had no idea that this was a system that existed. And it once again goes to show how diverse and nuanced the history of Black Americans is in this country. But one thing in particular stood out to me in the beginning of the book, which is when the author describes one of the characters as being extremely handsome and completely undesirable. I was like, watch out now, Anne. Watch out now, because the person who wrote the book was a white woman, Anne Rice. But I went on to read, and she just talks about how you have this young man who it clearly he's, got these outstanding features. He's, lighter skinned. He's got these colored eyes. He's got, he's beautiful. He's so handsome, but he'll never be able to pass for white because of his tightly coiled hair and his nose. And it puts him in a really weird position because he's almost there, but he stopped. And I was offended at first. And I went from offended to just kind of like thinking about it in the context of the times. And I was like, I think sometimes people run into that these days too. They will be light skin, they'll have the long hair, but they'll still have Afrocentric features. And so they're riding along on the privilege train, and all of a sudden, they're stopped, right? And that's basically what she was describing. And I think about that when I think about a young man like Tyriq Withers. To me, yes, he has blue eyes. If he grows his hair out, he has straight hair. But I never look at him and think, that's a white man. If anything, I would place him as being Brazilian, Puerto Rican. Like, I would take him to from the Black category over to the Latino category. I would absolutely drop him off in the Creole category. Is his name, instead of Tyriq Withers, is it Tyreek Thibodeau? Is it Tyreek Lowry? Is it Tyreek Guillory? I would never place him, though, as a white person, and it's definitely because of the nose. It's also because of the skin. Anytime I'm looking at a white person and I'm like, ooh, you're tan in there. Got a little olive to your skin. Where's your family from? I absolutely will ask. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, we're Italian, or, my grandmother was Spanish, or we're in Texas. We are Mexican. I have Mexican ancestry. Let's see, what else have I heard? Jewish ancestry. There's always something behind the darker tanning skin. And so, I definitely would not consider him 100% Black, but he's definitely not giving white passing to me, or white presenting, which brings me to the conversation that was had about Mary, back when Sinners came out. I remember people arguing about Zendaya possibly being cast, or Journey Smollett. And to me, it's like, these two women are clearly still Black women. Yes, or that you can tell they have Black ancestry. Yes, absolutely. You can tell they're probably mixed race individuals, but I would never look at them and think, oh, look at that white lady. And that's exactly what white presenting is. You look at the person and you have no question in your mind that that is a white person. So I already gave the examples of Kit Shapiro. I also think someone who fits in this category is Halsey, Mariah Carey, Tori Kelly. All three of those young women have a Black parent, but they have a white, they're biracial, on paper. I'm sure the Black parent was a mixed race individual, but they have a Black parent that looks phenotypically Black, and then they came out looking as they do. All of those people to me read as white people. I never in a million years would have known that Halsey was mixed race. I never in a million years would have thought she was Black on top of that. If she says, oh, my parent, I never in a million years would have thought of Tori Kelly. I maybe would have thought she was Latina in some way, but a Black one, never. And I remember with Mariah Carey as a kid learning, okay. I had no idea. But this is, to me, that's the example of, okay, these are white presenting people. They could definitely pass if they so chose. Anybody who, to me, has the telltale features or skin that is very, very dark and gets, I'm going to ask questions specifically with the features, which I feel like Zendaya and Journey Smollett both still have black features, even though they do have the lighter skin. There are some people, whenever we start talking about this, who are confusing, and people brought up Rashida Jones, Quincy Jones's daughter. To me, Rashida is not white presenting or white passing. She's mixed race presenting. I remember when she was on The Office, and they gave her the name Karen Filippelli, which I thought was really interesting. And they even had a episode where they were asking her, so what are you, Italian or something? Well, what's that about? You can tell this person is mixed race. And the characters that were questioning her identity were white characters. And so officially, she's not someone who could pass. She is not someone who is white presenting enough so that white people don't ask any questions, right? Meghan Markle, though, I feel a little differently about. I'm not sure. The first time I ever saw Meghan Markle was on an episode of The League. She was sitting at a bar, and one of the characters saw her and asked her out. And I just remember thinking, oh, wow, what am I looking at here? What kind of person is this? She's obviously very pretty, but I didn't quite know what I was looking at. And then by the time I watched Suits, I already knew that she was a black woman. However, a lot of people said that when she was on Suits, they didn't realize she was black until they hired that character to play her black father. And according to Meghan herself, when she met King Charles, he's not King Charles, when she met him, Prince Harry's dad, he did not know she was black. He was like, oh, okay. He had no idea. I don't know that I would never have no idea that Meghan was black, but I absolutely would not think that she was a white person. And a lot of people say that they would think that way. And I think with this conversation, specifically with Meghan Markle, we got to talk about the fact that black is a social construct. Being black is a social construct. Race in general is a social construct. And by that, I mean, it doesn't always equal your genetic background. Now, we get in conversations of race versus ethnicity versus nationality. And I'm going to be real with y'all. It all sounds like tomato, potato, topopo, toto to me. Okay. I'll be looking at the definitions and I'm like, okay, I got it. So race, okay, but nationality is okay, but ethnicity. Because ethnicity a lot of times sound like nationality. It was not like, and I'm just like, no. To me, to make it simple, you have the race of someone. So what we consider, if you're filling out a census, what do you check? And then you have somebody's genetic makeup and whatever other definitions, whatever. You may have where someone's from, blah, blah, blah. To me, that's nationality. Again, I'm not a scholar, but whenever we talk about Meghan, it's so interesting because you'll have people outside of the United States and even some people in the United States who will question why the black community rode for her so hard. Why we were trying so hard to support her, why we were so offended when it seemed like she didn't really return that support. And I'll be honest, the second season of With Love, Meghan, I only made it maybe 20 minutes to the first episode. You guys already know I'm not a homemaker. I really don't care about crafts. I don't throw parties. So I was really watching the show just because I wanted to support Meghan. I baked a cake. I've never baked a cake in my life. Baked a cake, bought a plant. Listen, you look behind me. These are fake, except for the one on the ground. That's the one I bought after watching With Love, Meghan. I was all over social media. Watch the show. I'm watching it. I'm watching it now. Woohoo. Go, Meghan, go. What's going on, Stephanie? And I think it was because I just knew she'd been through so much with the press. And I like to see somebody who literally an entire country tried to bury, or I should say the royal family tried to bury, who continued rising. And you may disagree with that, but it is what it is. It is what it is. But my point is that whenever I would talk about her, I would share the fact that there was a point in time where I got offended when she talked about how she sees herself. So while she might be considered black because of her genetic makeup, her mother's black, so she's 50%, she has never really lived life as a black person. In fact, going over to the UK and seeing that so much that was said about her and how people perceived her was about her race was really, really off-putting for her. And for me, when I first heard that, I was like, what you mean you in, what you mean? And it caused me to take a step back. And every time I describe that, people are like, why would you take a step back? Well, she's not even black. She's not even black in first place. And it's crazy because, okay, you can say that about her, but then what about Tracee Ellis Ross? We see that she's mixed and she's still, for the black community, starring in black sitcoms after black sitcom after black sitcom, putting out black hair care products. What about, and I'm having a hard time thinking about somebody else right now. They'll come to me in a second. But traditionally and historically here in the United States, a biracial individual, it's not strange for us to say, oh, this is a black person. It's not strange at all. And so hearing someone say, I'm sorry, despite what my genetic makeup might be, I don't really see myself that way. That's not how I live my life, definitely caused me to take a step back, which brings me to my next point. I don't like that when we talk about passing. And, even though I'd be like, oh, you guys, first of all, it's completely biologically possible. Secondly, no, Zendaya does not pass. Thirdly, I get annoyed. But when someone says, and they said this in the comments of the Tyriq video, they said, Black Americans are so weird about race. I don't see why this even has to be a discussion. I'm just kind of like, are you new? Do you not know what America is? Do you not understand? Because there's no way you can understand how important race has been in this country, to this country's detriment, without understanding why these types of conversations are so triggering for Black Americans. I just recently watched the Ed Sullivan documentary. I had never seen it before. I decided to watch it. And I thought I was just going to get a rundown of, this guy who hosted a show. And it was a variety show that was on for all these years. Yay. Instead, apparently, Ed Sullivan was like a broadcast freedom fighter. And he was like, I will have Black people on my shows. I don't care what y'all think. And let me tell you something. In the show, in the documentary, they talk about how literally the Klan were writing him letters, the Ku Klux Klan writing him letters. Get these Black people off of our screens. We don't want them performing in front of our children. We don't want that. We do not think that television is an appropriate. They should not be seen. And in the documentary, it also shows, and I had never seen Klan rallies. I had never seen, people marching in with their little Confederate flags. Look, I grew up in the South. Okay. I grew up, and it's so crazy because people don't consider Texas the South always, but I grew up in a place where kids would have Confederate flags on their cars or something, and we might say something about it, and they'd be like, it's just our history. It's just our family. Well, why do you have to be negative about it? I'm watching this movie, and I'm seeing this footage of Klan members who are screaming about the purity of the white race and screaming about, do you want your pure lily white daughter mixing with these animals, talking about Black men. And I'm like, that was literally 50 years ago. And they just took off their hoods and put on red caps that said, Make America Great Again. It's the same group of people in the same country. And you want to ask Black Americans why we're so weird about race? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So anytime I talk about, like this video or, I made videos in the past about Meghan Markle, and there's somebody that hops in the comments and they're like, she's not even Black. What are you Black about? I'm like, hey, slow you. First of all, where are you from? Where you from? Don't. If you're not a Black American, you just might not get it. All right. But for us, how somebody identifies, their ability to assimilate into a culture that is not so restricted and wasn't so legislated, and people didn't refer to as, they treated Blackness was a disease for a very long time. And some people still think that way. So we're always going to be very, very interested and very invested in conversations like this, even if we don't always know how to discuss it, what the right terms are, etc. And I don't like when people act brand new when it comes to the ways Black Americans talk about race. And especially when it comes to a subject like this, which is kind of like, who has an invisibility cloak, right? Who gets to slide in and out without the same restrictions? I don't like that. It's almost like, you know what? Show me your passport before you participate in this conversation. Okay? Okay. But anyway, going back to Megan for a second, I don't think that she's white presenting at all. But I do think that her children are. I do think that her children are. And given how they're growing up, but she's an intelligent woman, so I'm sure they'll be educated. But unlike Tyriq, who's like, I grew up in Black culture, like I'm a Black man, I don't think that Archie and the baby girl, whatever her name, I don't know her name, but I don't think they'll say the same things. When it comes to this topic, I think we should note that Black American culture, after everything I just said, we're not the only culture that has a history with the concept of passing. Again, the way that I originally defined it at the beginning of this video was just, you have a person who knows that they have one identity, but because of a irregularity in how they present, they're able to tell people that they might be something else, or people might assume that they're something else, and it's up to them to correct them or not correct them. And this doesn't only happen in Black American culture, although we come from a very interesting society when it comes to race. I've seen videos like this.
So I'm in Turkey, right? And people keep speaking Turkish to me, which I think is totally normal because we're in their country. Of course, they're going to speak their own language, right? Wrong. My tour guide tells me, oh, they speak English. They just specifically speak Turkish to you because they genuinely believe that you understand what they're saying. They keep asking you, Kazakh, Uzbek, Kyrgyz, Uyghur, wondering what Central Asian country you're from. And they're confused because you keep ignoring them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, Central Asian countries, they're Turkic. A lot of them understand Turkish because their languages are very similar. But you should know that, right? You're from Kyrgyzstan. I'm like, me from Kyrgyzstan? I'm just mixed. I'm Asian.
So this young man, he just happens to be white and Asian, but he goes over to that part of Asia and people are like, hey, you're one of us. Where do you come from? Who are you? Now, if he wanted to make it smooth, right, to get in and out of places, maybe make some alliances that he wouldn't be able to make otherwise, he could say, oh, yeah, I'm from so on. I just don't know the language. Care to teach me if you will? Like, he could claim that. And it would possibly give him access in a culture that he wouldn't have otherwise. And it'd just be just from the way that he looks. On that note, I want to talk about my passing story. When I was a little kid, not only did I find out, like in middle school or so, that I was very dark skinned and that there was something wrong with that, because I didn't grow up that way. I was very fortunate as a dark skinned Black woman not to grow up in a home where that was talked about in a negative way. All of my aunts, for the most part, are dark skinned. My uncles are all dark skinned. Most of my relatives procreated with dark skinned individuals, and the relatives that I grew up around, and for what that's worth. And we're just a very, very chocolate family. And in fact, my mom's nickname from my dad for the last 50 years of their relationship has been Coco. So I grew up with a dark-skinned mother who looked just like me, who was called Coco, who was told she was beautiful every day. So I did not know about the stigma of being a dark-skinned individual. I just had no idea. And so I head into the world and they're like, well, you have this darker skin, but also look at your nose. Oh my God. And you have these big lips. Are you African? And I got asked that all the time by other Black American children because they were used to, I don't know, just looking a little different. And I would get asked all the time if I was African. And what's crazy is that because of that, I really, really empathize with the experience of first generation immigrant students who happen to be African, who come over, their parents are African and they come over and they go to school, because I know how mean kids can be. They're already being mean because you're darker skinned, and now you're also African, which is further, even further away from whiteness. And we are a very, very colonized society here in the United States. There's all kinds of inferiority complexes that have come along with that. And so there's a lot of very negative thinking that's passed on to our children. And I remember growing up and seeing how, children who they might have parents from Africa, they might be first generation Africans, how they're made fun of, how they were talked about. And so I knew when people ask me if I'm African, they're trying to make fun of me. Now, I didn't think the same way about these children. So I didn't take it as like an insult, but I knew it was another way that they were trying to other me, right? And so that would happen when I was younger. And I would always say, no, I'm not. My family is from Texas. My family is from Texas. I would always say that. Then I get to college. And all of a sudden, people aren't asking me I'm African. They are telling me. Specifically, I remember there was a boy and he used to try and walk me to my dorm. He came up to me one day. I was walking out of a room and he would try and walk me to my dorm, and he would just sort of be around, buzzing around. And I was like, what is he doing? And finally, he was asking me, when are you going to come to the NSA meetings? And this is early 2000s. So I was like, the National Security Alliance? I'm thinking Edward Snowden? Are we dropping the WikiLeaks? What's going on? I had no idea what he was talking about. And he goes, no, the Nigerian Students Association. And I was like, oh, I'm not Nigerian. And when I tell you that man disappeared so fast, one of the things I thought was really fantastic about that period of my life where he wasn't the only one. I had a lot of young Nigerian students coming up to me when I first went to college. In fact, all through my college career, no matter what college I was at, UNT, U of H, whatever, come up to me and say, hey, you're Nigerian. Hey, when did your family get here? Hey, are you Igbo? Are you this? Are you that? And to me, a girl from Texas who's I had never run into this before. Nobody else in my family was being asked these questions. I didn't know what they was talking about. And I do believe that maybe at that time, some of them thought I was just denying my heritage. I wasn't. I didn't have it. I didn't know what was going on. But I always wonder what life would have been like if I had played along for a little bit, because one thing I will say, unlike the Black American experience, which can often be Black women learn that we're not always the men who have been raised alongside us and who have been socialized alongside us. We're not always their first choice. I did notice that when it came to the immigrant experience, they were encouraged to marry within their culture, to date within their culture. And I 100% think that that's what he was trying to do. If not for him, for his friends, get me to this meeting so that I can be in front of my people. And I was like, oh, that's how nice. I hate that I missed out on that. Because that definitely was not the experience with Black American men at that time in my life. And I want to say, for most of my life, that was just something that I knew, that if I'm around somewhere and I'm around a lot of African people, somebody might ask me, but it is what it is, whatever. I don't know much about it. And then one day I was in in a Walmart, 24-hour Walmart. They used to be over off of Westheimer. If you're from Houston, you know what I'm talking about. And this woman was checking me out and she goes, you're Nigerian? And I was like, no, my family's from Texas. And here's the thing, right? Most slaves came from West Africa. So if I was ever to do a 23andMe, which I won't, and it's because of my conversation with this woman, if I was ever to do a 23andMe, I probably would get a lot of Nigerian ancestry, a lot of West African ancestry, right? So it's not, I'm not saying, no, there's no way. There's a way. But what she meant was, when did you get here? Last week, last month? You just got here. You are, people thought I was first generation. And I told her, no, I'm not. I'm from Texas. She goes, no, you're Nigerian. And I said, oh, okay. And unlike the kids who made fun of me when I was in school, she was saying it with a smile on her face. And, I let her keep talking and she was like, yeah, you're Yoruba. That's what you are. And all of a sudden, I didn't just have a country people thought I was from. I had a tribe, a whole tribe. The way that I felt, the acceptance, I was like, thank you. And because of that woman, I will never take a 23. I'm not curious because I feel like I've already been claimed in a way. And even though it's not my reality and I have not even had jollof rice, okay? The fact that I was treated so warmly and so invitingly by a group of people who were like, oh, you're one of us. I was like, oh, there might be something to this, presenting a different way, even if that's not your real identity. But yeah, Black American culture, we're not the only people who look at someone and say, hey, are you one of us? I'm kind of getting a vibe, but getting a feeling, but I'm not sure. Please feel free to make it plain. Creating groups around shared identity is an integral part of the human experience. And it happens with races. It happens with how you present, your sexual identity. Hell, it happens with being in school and, hey, are you a cheerleader? I'm a cheerleader. We both got on a jacket. Like it's all the same thing. It all stems from the same thing. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this because I was like, whoa, I don't like the way we discuss this topic. And it's something that I wanted to talk about before it gets buried again. And, later on we have another situation where you have another actor who we can't quite tell. I don't know. And then all of this will come back up and it'll be the same thing. We won't be able to believe that this can even happen, which it's very possible. We won't be able to decide, well, who can really pass and what does it look like? Just for the record, it should be completely unnoticeable to the naked eye. Like, it should be something that they, maybe they got their hair wet and it curled a little too much. Maybe that, but even then, for the most part, if you are white presenting to the point where you can pass, bro, I should not be able to look at you and even want to ask. Okay. Now, sometimes you might get a little tingle. You might feel something. They might say something a certain way and it's like, who'd you grow up around? But for the most part, that's the solid rule. So no, Zendaya does not. No. We will be fighting about, is it presenting? Is it what's the right way to say it? And we'll also be trying to talk ourselves out of why it's such a big deal, knowing what a viciously racist country we live in, and appearing to be not Black is sometimes the difference between life and death, literally. So we got to be honest about why it triggers us. We got to be honest about why we want to talk about it. And I don't think it's ever going to not be super interesting and super like, whoa, it's always going to affect us in a certain way. But gosh, it's very annoying when the same kind of talking points get brought up over and over again. Something else I forgot to mention in this video, I had written it down on my outline, but then I just kept talking and I never got to it, is the fact that many Black people get specifically triggered by this topic because it would seem as if some people's goal is to completely eradicate all of the Black lineage from their family lines. We see this in professional sports. You have athletes such as Patrick Mahomes, who has a Black father, but who married a white woman. His children will be white presenting. Patrick Mahomes rarely, if ever, refers to his racial identity. And I think within the past few years, we've seen a lot of players get to the NBA specifically, and it's very clear that they are mixed race. And in a lot of those situations, they end up procreating with white women or with non-Black women. And so within a few generations, the Black lineage in a specific family is completely wiped away. And for obvious reasons, that's very triggering to Black Americans. We already live in a country where people are trying to erase us and not acknowledge us every day. When it seems like that's happening in a family, whether it's on purpose or an accident, it does make people, I think, ask questions. A couple of months ago, I was scrolling online and I came across this topic where people were discussing this, and they were calling it the Diana Ross-If-Ication of the Black family. Specifically, what they were talking about is the fact that Diana Ross herself is a Black woman, but most of her children, 99% of her children, are biracial. Only the child that she had with Berry Gordy, her oldest daughter, is 100% Black. The rest of her children are biracial. And then all of those children procreated with white individuals as well. And now if you were to look at a picture of Diana Ross's family, her grandchildren, these are people who will never have to be asked about their ancestors. Well, they might have to be when their parents take them to school, or, as they're growing up and their friends see, oh, hey, your mom is, so on and so forth. Their last name being, I don't think any of them actually have the last name Ross. Actually, they do. Yes. Their last name being Ross. People might have questions. Maybe they'll have musical inclinations and they might bring up, oh, well, Diana Ross was my grandmother. And so it will come up. But without that extensive interview of their identity, you would not know that any of Diana Ross's literal grandchildren are Black. You would not know that they have Black ancestry. And that was only within 2 generations, right? So seeing something like this, I think, is another thing that can be triggering for Black Americans. Again, we live in a society that can treat Blackness like a disease. And so a lot of times people that are seen as having a further relationship from it and being closer to whiteness are seen as they're prize winners in a way. And when we see families like this where the Black lineage has all but been erased, it's almost a little spooky. Like, oh my God, where did we go? There are even some societies that have directly encouraged sort of this complete eradication of Black lineage. In South America, it was a process called blancamiento, where people were encouraged to intermarry and reproduce as often as they could in order to completely erase their Black lineage. And you cannot be a person of color and be a little bit like, wow. Wow. So I meant to add this in as well. Like I said, I just skipped over it. But when we talk about passing and people act like Black Americans specifically are so wild for responding to it at all or for caring about it at all, it's like, well, we do live in an incredibly racist country. And we are a part of a people that has often been under attack for various things. And so there's just a lot of reasons why we could be triggered by something like this, by seeing it, by discussing it. And I think one of those reasons definitely is it reminds us that in some ways, if society had its choice, it would erase us completely. And while I don't think that that's what any of these people, specifically in Diana Ross's family, set out to do, I do think that it happened. And I think for some people, to keep that from happening, it takes a active choice to procreate with and marry people who represent the other side of your family, the Black side of your family. But then you're telling people who to love and it gets sticky. So I did want to talk about this as well, because I think this is another reason why when you bring up this subject, Black Americans specifically get a little spooked, because it's like, it's just a very visible representation of a painful truth of having Black identity in the United States. The fact that some people would rather just completely erase you from their lineage than take steps to continue certain traits and certain features within their family. Anyway, moving back to the video. I want to say about Tyriq, though, Tyriq, he's really interesting to me because unlike a lot of mixed race men who are positioned in Hollywood, he went out of his way to make it clear, like, I'm a Black man. I was raised in Black culture, etc. And you don't see this a lot. In fact, a lot of mixed race men, you will see them, especially if they have white mothers, you will see them sort of clinging to an American man. There's one guy who was on social media a couple years ago. Now, he's not white presenting at all. You can't even tell that man is mixed race, but his mom is Lebanese. And he'll be like, he makes a lot of videos talking about how he's Lebanese. And I don't think I ever heard him talk about, I'm a Black, like finding pride or finding comfort in his Black identity. I don't think I ever heard him talk about that. But another interesting thing about Tyriq is that a couple years ago, he was a YouTuber. And when he decided to become an actor, he privated all his YouTube videos and he pivoted. But he was a YouTuber and he was dating another YouTuber. And the way he presents himself and how he speaks, totally different than now, right?
You. Stop! Plug. Wait, you hear that? What does that sound like? Sounds like your merch. Right?
My merch? You mean the merch coming out October 6th?
Oh, October 6th? Ah!
So, the merch will be dropping today.
We're going to show you all our routine of getting ready to go out on a date. And where are we going?
We're going to...
We're going to a fancy restaurant.
And he wouldn't tell me what it was, so I just might have to look cute, which... Yep.
And so there's also videos about him online. You know, he'd joined a fraternity, and I don't know if he was maybe like a YouTuber in high school and then he went to college and joined a black fraternity and whatever. But, you know, he's in that line. I think he's an alpha and he's doing his little strut. I'm like, oh, okay. And then you see him in videos with black women and how he talks to us. And well, I'm not in the videos, but how he talks to them and the things he says and whatever. And I'm like, who cooked here? Who got to old Tyriq? Because I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like do just popping, you know, whatever through life, and he met somebody and he was like, okay, wait, what's going on with her? Wait. Oh, she said she only date black men. Hey, I'm a black man. All right, sister, I'm a good black man. He went from being very, very not only white presenting, but performing his identity in a way that I don't want to say acting white, because whoa, a flashback from my childhood, but definitely not performing his identity in a way that would make someone say, hey, who were you raised around? Were you socialized around black people? Like, what's the issue? There's a difference. And he went from that to, I'm an alpha, I'm a black man, and hey girl, come here. You know what I mean? So there's obviously a switch there, which could also just happen with him growing up. But it was very fascinating for me to hear him talk about his identity and present it in the way that he did. I was obviously very turned off by the way that people responded, and so that's why I made this video. And now I'd like to know what you think. I know this is a touchy subject. It can be. But I've been wanting to talk about it since Mary popped out on Sinners, and so I wanted to discuss it. And that is the end of this video. And as always, thank you for watching.